start another lesson, but it's still under the mentality, topic of mentality. We have discussed about the consciousness in detail, but it doesn't mean that we have discussed all the information about consciousness. But during since the course has limited time, we have to be satisfied with what we have discussed so far. And if you have any questions, please write down in a paper so I can answer in the future lectures. So then we come into the new handout, which is called mental concomitants, which is called chetasikas. We know chitta is the action of knowing an object, and this chitta cannot arise alone. When the chitta happens, taking and cognizing an object, together with it, there happens some secondary functions which are involved, which are contributing to this cognition. If you remember, we mentioned that in the chapter for mentality part 1 and consciousness, there is chitta has the primary level of cognition. At the same time, there is a cohesive cognition or collective cognition done by the chitta chetasikas together. So we call it the collective cognition. And then we mentioned that the chitta performs the primary level of cognition. So primary level, basic level of cognition. And the chetasikas today we are going to mention, they are the secondary level of secondary acts of cognition. So primary act of cognition is chitta. Secondary acts of cognition are the chetasikas. When they come together, we call it a collective cognition. So if I go it, like chitta has the primary level of cognition. Primary act of cognition. Then chetasikas and the secondary acts of cognition. So when both are together, we call it the cognition done by all together, we call it collective cognition. Collective or cohesive. Can leave it there. So cognition. Right? Cohesive or collective cognition. So all together. I think if you remember. Because what is the function of chitta? Chitta is the act of focusing on a one object, having separated it from other objects. The mind had the possibility of cognizing various objects at a certain time. So one object is focused at a time. So this one object, focusing on a one object, happens based because the chitta delimits certain objects and focuses upon it. So that is why we call in the cognition the primary act is done by the chitta. If a one object is not so focused on, what happened? There are other actions of other secondary actions of tasting the flavor, recognizing it, understanding it deeply, or making compassion towards it, or whatever other acts are not possible. So in the cognition, the sphere of cognition, chitta performs the very basic level. But chitta itself cannot come to an effective level of cognition. So it needs the support of some other mental acts. These are the secondary acts of cognition. We call them chetasikas. Chitta needs to contact with the object. And also it needs to flavor at that moment there should be one sensitivity with the flavor of the object, tasting the flavor of the object. It has to recognize the object. The object should be recognized. So likewise, this act of cognition come into an effective level. It needs the support of some other secondary mental acts. So therefore, always the cognition happens together. So we call it the collective level of cognition. At the same time, in the Bhavanga lesson, we also mentioned about the ordinary, primary consciousness and secondary consciousness, if you remember. Primary consciousness was the Bhavanga Chitta, and the secondary consciousness were the Viti Chittas, which sprung from these Bhavanga Chitta. So if you go to the footnote of today's handout, you may see in the footnote, there are first footnote, it says primary or basic act of collective or cohesive cognition is the consciousness. Secondary acts of collective or cohesive cognition is mental concomitants. Then primary or original consciousness, according to this handout, is the life continuum, because it's mentioned in the Katavattu likewise. Then we secondary consciousness or the consciousness which arise in the mind processes, Viti Chittas. So these technical terms I'll be using time to time. So I'll repeat again, primary basic level of the basic act of cognition is the consciousness, and the Chetasikas are the secondary acts of cognition, and they collectively we call it collective cognition or cohesive cognition, which is done as a collective act. So the cognition which makes effects to our life, significant cognitions which happen in our life, we experience, are a result of this collective cognition. Chitta itself cannot perform this cognition into a very effective level. So based on that, we also introduce a new phenomenon called the phenomenon of effectiveness, which means Chitta always should have at least a basic level of cognition. All the Chittas should have. So now we are focusing on these secondary acts of cognitions we call the mental concomitants. So they are the subsidiary or secondary acts in the mental collective cognition. There are 52 such mental acts mentioned in the Theravada Abhidhamma doctrine. But if you go to other schools of Buddhist schools, you may have different types of Chetasikas, different list of Chetasikas. So at the end of the mentality lecture, which will be, because initially I planned to finish it in 6 lectures, but I found that it has to be extended for another few lectures. At the end of this lecture for mentality, I'll be discussing what is the criterion, how to decide the Paramatta Dhammas in a certain tradition. It means some traditions may have different explanations about certain mental acts that we experience. Theravadians would explain this differently. For example, in the Sarvastivadian doctrine, they mention sati is a chetasika that can be found in every chitta, whether wholesome or unwholesome, because unwholesome consciousness can also recall. But in the Theravadian doctrine, it was explained in a different aspect, with a different approach. We explain it based on the causal relation. We don't attribute one Chetasika for this recalling the past. So likewise, in this sense, most of the Buddhist schools share a similar characteristics in terms of knowing, understanding the mental attributes that we experience practically. But when we come into theoretically organizing them, there have been some differences. So that is not a big case in the end, because it will not affect our meditation. The number of Chetasikas, how much we classify them, will not affect us as long as we understand their functions properly. I will be explaining this point at the end of this end of the lecture for the mentality in another few lectures. So then we have if you go to the 5.2 paragraph, it says mental concomitants always arise together with the consciousness. Then it arises always together with. But in some suttas, few places the Buddha has mentioned consciousness arise and certain Chetasikas follow them. So how should the Theravadins explain this? At this point, I'll be also addressing this at the end of the lecture, because in the Mahavedalla Sutta also it is mentioned as mental concomitants like Vedana, Sanya, Panya are inseparable from the consciousness. Because in one sutta Buddha mentioned, Chitta arises, certain concomitants follow it. So some may argue that Chitta and Chetasikas arise separately. So I'll discuss about this argument also at the end. So here what I want to say is they arise together always with consciousness. And then we also mention when it comes to the rupa, materiality. Materiality always exists in clusters. We call them rupa kalapa. In the same way, these mental acts, Chitta and Chetasika, they are mental acts. They are also Paramatta Dhammas. They also happen in clusters. These clusters we give a name called Chittupada. That's what the 5.2 mentions. A mental cluster of Chitta Chetasikas is called a Chittupada. You can find the reference in the Mulatika, this naming. It should be thoroughly noted that albeit Chitta and Chetasikas arise together in clusters, they are different realities with different intrinsic characteristics. If you go into Milinda Panha, Venerable Nagasena mentions that one of the Buddha's great contributions to the philosophy or to his disciples is differentiating these Chitta Chetasikas which happen together at the same time. He distinguished them, discriminated them, and explained them separately. It was a very difficult thing to be done. So it is one of the great contributions from the Buddha to the posterity, like the future generation. So then the thing is, though they arise together, they have different distinct intrinsic natures which are unique to them. Then there are 4 primary characteristics of Chetasikas. What are these primary characteristics? We normally say Chatu Sampayoga Lakkana. Ekuppada, Eka Nirodha, Eka Lambana, Eka Vattuka. It means they have the same arising with that of consciousness they associate. Now we have to understand in the practicality, actuality, consciousness Chetasikas arise together. They happen in clusters, one after another in a certain particular being. So in one cluster, the arising of Chitta and the arising of Chetasika is the same. This is called the Ekuppada. Ekuppada doesn't mean they arise together. It means they have the same arising. That is how we translate it. That is true that they arise together, but they have the same arising. It means when the cluster happens together, they are mixed with each other, and it's a one kind of collective cognition which is happening. So it is happening together. For example, when the Rupa Kalapa arises, Patavi, the hardness, softness, and all these Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayu, they happen together and they passes away together. Chitta Chetasikas are mixed with each other more than this, more than the Rupas. So therefore, this cluster happens together, exists together, and passes away together. So that's why it says they have the same arising that of the consciousness they associate. They have the same passing away. It also says that they have the same persisting, and they have the same object, because Nāma is always cognizing an object, and they associate the same base, same rupa in the Panchavokara realm. Then 5.4 says, as shown above, mentality is in a single Chittupada. Chittupada is a cluster of mentalities. This is not a immaterial cluster. Has the same genesis, vanishing, object, and the base. They are all same. Due to these characteristics, Chitta Chetasikas in one mental cluster are said to be Sampayutta, Sampayoga, and Sahagata. These are synonymous words. Sampayutta, Sampayoga, and Sahagata. Right? Sampayutta, Sampayoga, and Sahagata. Chitta Chetasikas which arise together are inseparable from each other. You can see given the reference 4.5 in a previous lecture. Though the reference is given from Anupada Sutta and Mahavedalla Sutta. Though they possess peculiar intrinsic characteristics, conscious and mental concomitants that arise as one Chittupada are extremely difficult to be discerned as separate realities. It is very extremely difficult. Therefore, what happened? They appear as a single reality from the moment of their genesis arising up to the moment of their vanishing. So they have different characteristics, but they are so close, like mixed with each other, so they are very difficult to be discerned or discriminated as separate entities. Therefore, they are called Sansatta. The word Sansatta is given because they appear as Eki Bhuta Miva. It means as one, they becoming as one, appears as one, but in the literature they are completely different mental entities, but they are influenced by each other. So as mentioned in the Abhidhamma of the Theravada, there are 52 Chetasikas, and they are basically grouped into 3 categories. So this is the list of the Chetasikas. Since this is a fundamental class, like course of fundamentals, so to my understanding, all the 52 Chetasikas are basic fundamentals in the Theravada tradition. For it to be a comprehensive course, actually all the 52 has to be explained in detail. But since we don't have time, I'll be explaining only a few salient fundamentals that are useful for useful for this course, for the further lectures. So therefore, I will not be able to explain all the 52. So these are the list of the 52 Chetasikas, but in different traditions you may get different number of Chetasikas. So they are divided into 3 groups. First one is Anya Samana Rasi. There are 13 Chetasikas. Group of mentalities which are ethically variable. Ethically variable means it's depend on the other 2 groups. The second group is mentioned as a group of unwholesome mentalities. These are the mentalities which burn us, which brings us discomfort. Then the third group is the group of beautiful mentalities. Beautiful means they brings us comfort, they brings us happiness. Happiness means spiritual bliss, spiritual happiness. The body and the mind becomes healthier if someone abides with these beautiful mental states always. So what are the ethically variable mental state means? These first 13 mental states can get mixed with akusala mental states and also beautiful mental states time to time. It means, for example, if I take the number 11 in the Chetasika group, 5.611, number 11, it's virya, effort. Virya is there when we do wholesome deeds. There should be effort to do wholesome deeds. At the same time, to perform unwholesome deeds, there should be virya. If someone is hunting and killing animals, he should have the effort to do that. It cannot be done without an effort. So therefore, virya is an ethically variable mental concomitant. When it arises together with unwholesome mental states, we call it defiled. At the same time, when it arises with wholesome or beautiful mental states, we call it beautiful. So therefore, they associate both the types of mental states according. That is why we call them ethically variable. Anya Samana. So among these, if you go to the 5.7, 5.7 says, among the 14 akusala rasi, if you look at the second group, there are altogether 14 Chetasikas, 5.614 to 5.627. So there are 14 Chetasikas which are called akusala, unwholesome. Among these akusala Chetasikas, as mentioned in the literature, there are 6 Chetasikas. 6 Chetasikas which exist in 3 stages. Among these 14, there are 6 which exist in 3 stages. What are these 3 stages? They are the stage of transgression. It means when we perform certain acts, deeds, in like killing, stealing and so forth, unwholesome deeds, at that level the mind's mental states are very aggressive, can come into a very active state. Then the state of obsession, it means before the action we think about such actions. At that level, it is not so active as while we are the transgression happens. And then the latent state. Latent state, we can call it at the state where these mental states are sleeping. Sleeping doesn't mean they exist in ultimate realities. The possibility, the uneradicated nature is still found. So among the 14 natures, these serve 6 Chetasikas. I have given the list: lobha, dosa, moha, mana, ditti, vichikiccha and vichikiccha. These 6 Chetasikas are said to be in 3 states. 3 states. That are the 3 states: latent state of obsession. They come when we make the thinking, and when we transgress, they are called in the level of transgression. So the thing is, these mental 6 states are considered to be so powerful in the long samsara. We call them tamagata. I have explained in this short paragraph. They are very powerful, these 6 qualities. What are these qualities? Lobha is greed. And we have dosa, anger. We have moha, delusion, which is very powerful. Then mana, our conceit. Ditti, the wrong person, wrong ideas, wrong views. And vichikiccha, doubt about the profound phenomenon, about the rebirth and so forth. So these are 6. Is moha. Avijja is moha, right? So as a Chetasika, thank you, moha is avijja and moha are same, right? Normally in Anusaya we have avijja. So then also we mentioned in this, there are 7 Anusayas, but here I have put them into one lobha. One lobha is divided as kamaraga and bhavaraga. I have explained it in the footnotes, right? I have explained it in the footnotes. Yeah, then we go to among the 52 Chetasikas, I will be discussing 3 Chetasikas today. One is chanda. Chanda is zeal, or the will to do, a desire to do a certain action. This Chetasika is sometimes not discussed much, but it has a great effect to the mental sphere. Chanda is the will to do certain action. It's a wanting to do a certain action. So also we mentioned there is a Chetasika called volition. Volition is chetana. Actually, the chetana we normally call it the intention. When we explain it in the Abhidhamma perspective, we all mention it as a force of the mental cluster. Because all the mentalities to function properly, to come into the cognition of effectiveness, level of effectiveness, there should be a certain force. We call it like a fuel. This force, arrangement of the mental states to perform well is done by chetana. It is the powerful mental state. I explained this under the consciousness. It is a universal mental state necessary for all the collective cognition. That is called volition. So here chanda means the want to do certain actions, desire to do certain actions. These are 2 mental states. Volition and chanda are different. But sometimes it may appear to us as the same, but they are different things. So volition, it makes the mental states to perform the action to a certain task. Volition is something that directs the mental stream towards a certain function. So it's like chetana is said to be like a leading a farmer. In certain Asian countries, when they do the paddy farming, when they want to reap the paddy, you cannot reap the paddy by yourself in ancient days. So you have to gather all the people, surrounding neighbors. So people come and do the reaping in one paddy field. The next day they go to the other one's paddy field. They mutually help each other. But when someone comes to the people gather to reap the paddy in a certain paddy field, the paddy field owner has the responsibility. Others will just reap. The paddy field owner has to organize all the actions. He has to think about others, and also at the same time he has to do the reaping by himself. So likewise, chetana is a mental act that will makes other mental states to perform their action. At the same time, chetana itself is the force of the chitta to do this action. So that's why the Buddha mentioned this chetana is the kamma. This force is what gives results in the future. That is the most powerful mental state among the all 52. Is the most powerful in the whole 52. But here we are talking about desire, chanda. Chanda is a wanting to do a certain act. This chanda can be seen in many chittas. When we want to do a wholesome deed, we have a wanting. Some people start to interpret that this wanting is an attachment. No, this is a misunderstanding about attachment. If someone wants to do a good thing, this is called kusala chanda. It's a wholesome will. Kusala chanda. Kusala chanda. Desire is not always supported by attachment. Attachment means the mind the Chetasika likes a certain object. Liking means what? How do we define liking in Buddhism? Liking means the mind doesn't accept the separation from that object. I'll repeat that again. Liking means the mind doesn't accept the separation from that object. Then we find there is a certain attachment. Attachment is found if something we are attached to someone or something, we don't want to get separate from that person or from that object. Then we can say it is attached. So wanting to do a kusala like a good deed, that is a different thing. It's a one kind of wanting to do. There is no attachment in it. Sometimes people may get attached to certain wholesome deeds. When we lose the opportunity to do wholesome deeds, sometimes we may get upset. but that is not not the sorrow caused by a certain attachment. It is two different things. When we get sorrow because of attachment, and when we get irritated or agitated because we are not getting the opportunity to do a good thing, these are completely two things. I think you can experience by yourself. So therefore, attachment is a different thing, chanda is a different thing. So, but when this chanda, because this is a ethically variable cetasika, if you go to the list, you can find chanda is the number 13. Chanda is the number 13 in the list. It is the last cetasika of ethically variable group. So it can appear with both wholesome and unwholesome actions. So when the chanda is found in dosa mula chitta, when someone wants to hurt other one, still there is a desire to do. So this wanting is all the chanda. Chanda appears in the dosa mula chitta also. Chanda appears in the lobha mula chitta also. But at that time, chanda is greatly influenced by the lobha. So another point is, the kama chanda, we should not misunderstand it with chanda. Chanda is different. Kama chanda is identically the lobha. Then the next point what I want to say is, chanda, now we say chanda is a desire to do certain things. But sometimes chanda may appear liking certain objects. That is also possible. Chanda appears liking certain objects. But there is a special feature there. I'll be reading that. The second paragraph on the chanda. Chanda does not always appear as a desire to accomplish certain tasks. Sometimes it is seen liking certain objects. However, at that time, it likes the object as necessity requirements to accomplish the desired tasks. That's the point. When chanda likes a certain object, it is always related to that particular task. It means it likes the objects because these objects are required for that particular task. For example, people who wants to, archers, in the ancient time, they do the archery, they do the shooting with the arrows, and they earn money from the king. So these arrows, they know they will throw them away. They will, by using these arrows, they will shoot others. There is no necessity for them to get attached to these things. They will collect them because they know for their earning, these arrows are useful. In the same way, when a person wants to perform dana, charity, he has to collect money. He has to collect the things, goods. So he will surely like them. Like them means he will protect them. He will keep them properly. He will not let them to be destroyed, because he knows if he wants to accumulate good deeds, punya, kusala, he has to keep them, and then he can offer them to the sangha or to the people who are in need. So at that time, there is a certain liking for these objects. This liking is not a lobha, it is called kusala chanda. So it's like these objects are liked by chanda because they are necessity requirements to perform a certain action. So then it comes, we understand, if chanda is liking certain objects that are to be abandoned, to given away, there's nothing to say about it liking the objects that are desired, because at that time it's connected with lobha. When the lobha arises, we have to understand it likes the object. At that particular time, chanda should be known, as I think the chanda should be known as the desire to enjoy that object. It is the urge to enjoy the object. Then in comparison, there is a last paragraph gives a very good idea about the spiritual aspect of chanda. In comparison, we normally say chanda is powerful than lobha. Why do we say so? Because lobha is the attachment towards the objects, to our own life, and also to other people. If someone wants to be liberated from this suffering of samsara, he has to get rid of this attachment. How one get rid of attachment towards things or persons? One way is giving them as charity. That the money or the things that people have, instead of keeping them in abundance, we normally offer them for charity. That is the one Buddhist way of practicing giving up the attachment. Another way is renouncing the world, renouncing the household life. For that you have to give up the attachment. If someone goes to a meditation retreat for 10 days, or maybe for a month, or temporary ordained, this is also a certain kind of a renunciation, because we are not concerning about things during that time. Or we come in, and also we have to get rid of this attachment by considering the defects of these realities, like we do in Vipassana meditation or Asubha meditation. So all these detaching acts of detachment is possible only when there is a great will to do so. If the attachment towards the object is powerful, too powerful, we are unable to give it. We are unable to renounce them. We are unable to see the defects and get detached. So according to the spiritual aspect of Buddhism, kusala chanda, wholesome desire to do such detaching activities, the chanda has to go beyond the power of lobha. So only then it is possible to give up the attachment. So then the thing is, if some people, the Buddhist literature believes, except that the people have got fully liberated from giving up attachment, so in comparison, normally it says chanda is powerful than the lobha. Chanda is powerful than the lobha. When the chanda is spiritual chanda, the will, spiritual will is higher than the attachment, it can abandon the attachment. We call it chandidipada or chandadipati at that time. So this is a brief explanation about chanda. Then we come into the moha. Moha is the delusion, which is a very important, prominent cetasika in the Buddhist literature. Moha. Moha is the mental act which arises with chitta, and what happens is this mental act veils the mind, it covers the mind. So chitta and the collective cognition knows the object. When the moha is present, this collective cognition and the chitta is unable to know the real nature of the object. So that's why we say it veils the object. So what happens? When influenced by moha, chitta and the mental concomitants come into wrong considerations, wrong perceptions, sanya vipallasa, hallucinations of perception. We may think something which is not permanent as permanent, something which is suffering, which gives suffering as something which is pleasurable, something which is non-self as a self, something which is repulsive as a beautiful thing. So these kinds of wrong considerations happens only when moha is there. Sometimes because of the influence of moha, the chitta also get really affected and it comes into a higher type of level of delusion. We call it chitta vipallasa. As the example is given as coming under the spell of an ancient magician. And if this moha is very strong, what happens? We come into wrong views, ditti vipallasa. Then there's another simile for moha is like a darkness. In the darkness, people are unable to see the things as they are. When the moha is present, the beings doesn't see the benefits of wholesome deeds, disadvantages of unwholesome deeds. So automatically, because of the inherited leaning of the mind towards the bad deeds, beings tend to perform unwholesome acts. Because the mind stream is followed by latent defilements. According to the Buddhist literature, there is no latent wholesome act. Latent acts are always unwholesome. So when we give up the effort to spirituality, it's very easy to do the unwholesome deeds. It's very difficult to do the wholesome deeds because there is always a force coming towards the unwholesome side. Therefore, when the moha doesn't see the benefits of the wholesome and doesn't see the disadvantage of the unwholesome deed, automatically the people give up the wholesome side. Most of the people go to the unwholesome, perform the unwholesome deeds. And also this ignorance is equal to a pair of tinted glasses, tinted colored glasses. What is the reason? When we look the outside world to a tinted glasses, we see the world according to the color of the lens of the spectacles. So in the same way, the mind reacts to the object according to the way the moha deluded the mind. That shows the object to the mind. It means moha is delusion, but this delusion has various aspects. If the moha presents the object as something to be nice, attached, the chitta will get attached to it. If the moha presents to the mind covers the good qualities of a person and shows him as a person to be hated, the mind will hate it. If the moha covers, it gets highly deluded and is unable to understand the true phenomenon of the life, the mind will come into a doubt. So likewise, how the moha views the objects, that is how the chitta reacts to the object. So when it shows the mind the good aspects, the unreal good aspects of an object, the mind gets attached to that. If it covers the true qualities of a good person, and if we try to see the bad side of the person and we cover the good things, so we try to get hated, try to get angry about it. So what does this say? According to the Buddha's idea, this is another very basic fundamental of the teaching. I didn't mention in the handout. Very basic fundamental. According to the Buddha's idea, there is no object in the world that should be attached at. There is no object in the world that one should get angry at. So all the objects have their true qualities based on these true qualities. As the Buddha considers, if someone gets attached to something, if someone doesn't like a certain object, this is always influenced by the ignorance. So this is his fundamental theory. So when he presents this doctrine, he would say all the unwholesome deeds, attachment, dislike, anger, these all are supported by moha. What does this say? So it is always ignorance is there. When the ignorance is there, the mind doesn't see the true nature of the object. So what is the true nature of the object? If the true nature of the object is really known by the mind, there cannot be any attachment. There cannot be any delusion. So what does this implicitly say? According to Buddha, there is no object that people are supposed to get attached according to his level, and there is no object that one should get angry or upset about. Right? So this is another fundamental which can be fetched out from this information. Then we turn towards the mental sphere. Ignorance is the most basic cause for all the unwholesome deeds, all the unwholesome qualities. And also latent, there's in the paragraph, we say latent level of ignorance is the penultimate paragraph, one before the last. Latent level of ignorance is the reason, the same page. Latent level of ignorance is the reason for the defiling natures to prevail associated in the mind stream. When the anusaya moha is removed, the remaining defilements will not have opportunity to sustain. Then what happens? Among the latent defilements, craving is the main reason why jhana mentalities gain the attributes of giving results in future. Jhana, karma is why the certain chittas get the potency of giving results? Because of the craving. Why craving is present? Why do we get attached to this life? Because we don't see the true nature of this life. So therefore, moha, ignorance, is also one reason, very salient reason for the chittas to become kusala or akusala, to get the wholesome nature, like to get the ability of giving results. Moha is a very important reason. But the most proximate reason for the wholesomeness is the lobha. And also in Dhammasangani we have lots of synonymous terms given to moha. So I have given some terms. And then at the bottom of that explanation we say moha or avidya is considered as the main root for the continuation of the Nāma Rupa stream of the samsara, as mentioned by the Buddha in the Avidya Sutta. And moha is found in all the 12 akusala chitta. And also moha is considered as a root of consciousness. I'll be discussing this point in the next week's lecture. There are roots of the samsara, roots of the consciousness. Right? So these are all also have to be discussed regarding Cetasika. Then we come to the last topic of today's lecture, lobha, attachment. So this is also a very detailed and very broad topic, this lobha. I'll be focusing on some salient point that we don't discuss normally. So lobha is the attachment towards objects. I'll read the first paragraph. It's easy to understand. It craves for objects like a being who is in great thirst, longs for water. Hence is called tanha. Tanha is the wanting, craving. Like a glue, it mentally sticks at the objects. So in the Pali, makkata lepo viya. Lobha desires for light object like a lump of flesh put on a heated pan. then it does not forget or give up the attached objects easily, like an oil stain on a cloth. It's very difficult to forget objects that we get attached to. Then like a river flowing down from a mountain, lobha continuously arises in beings throughout the days and nights. It's a normal, generally we say, beings are taken into the ocean of samsara more harmfully to the four woeful states by its current. Hence it is called the river of craving. Buddha has given lots of explanations, details about this lobha and how to eradicate it. It's a very broad topic. So I think most of the students, most of the listeners are aware of this about lobha and methods of explaining lobha. I'll be pointing about some very basic, very important doctrinal philosophies of lobha, which are unique to the Buddhist traditions. So I'm talking about, these are the 2 points, 5.10, 10.1 and 10.2 under this chapter, because number 5 is representing the chapter number. So 10.1 and 10.2 discuss about these two salient points. What does I want to say? Which is mentioned in bold letters. Latent lobha greatly influence the consciousness stream of beings. It means when a being is going to die, the mind stream, someone is going to die, the mind stream acts. If we consider this as the death, so consider this is the moment. So this, at this level, if he has not, latent craving has not been eradicated. If latent craving has not been eradicated, what happens? This mind stream tends to go further. Go further means it tends to continue after the death. The reason is there is a certain force, urge to continue living, because this craving never be satisfied completely. Beings may live for 20 years, 30 years, 40, 50 years. They see the objects each and every day through the eyes, but beings never feel like I have enough seeing objects. We never feel like the sounds have been heard enough. We never feel I have tasted enough taste. Always there is a wanting. This wanting can never ever be satisfied in terms of giving the object. It's like filling a basket without the bottom. It always keeps on filling only. It will never be satisfied. At the same time, beings always want to continue to live. Some people, sometimes when we get older or when we get sick, or sometimes people when they encounter difficulties, they tend to suicide or they wish they may die. But this happens not because they have overcome the craving to live. This is because they cannot face or tackle the difficulties they have in their life. For instance, if they were made young by a miracle, or if their problems in their life are solved, if someone is worrying about separation, if the partner is brought to them, so all these cases, what happens? They will not tend to go for the suicide or to destroy their life. So therefore, suicide is not something happens because there is no interest for living. It is mainly because of they cannot tackle the problems they have in their life, or because of a completely full wrong view about the life. So therefore, latent craving, when there is latent craving, this force, because of this force to want to live, this mental stream will start to continue. I'll be discussing about this point in detail when we talk about the continuation of samsara in the next semester. So this latent craving, as long as it is there, the mind stream has a force to continue. Continue means not to stop at the moment of death. But at the same time, we also discussed that every chitta has a force, supporting force to the other chitta. That force is getting weak at that moment, so the force is given by the latent craving. At the same time, when the craving is there, karma, the past karma, comes to get activated to give a result, to bring a new rebirth. Based on this karma, we get one of the signs, one of the 3 signs. We call it kamma, kamma nimitta and gati nimitta. When the latent craving is there, the mind stream automatically tends to continue further. At the same time, the mind stream gets inclined towards the sign, that near-death sign. There are two types of cravings working at that moment. The inherited craving to continue with the life, and also because at that moment what is presented to the mind automatically inclines towards that. It is something like a person who is going to get drowned. We normally say even a straw is given to him, he will try to grab it. Whatever thing is given to him, he will try to grab it. In the same way, the mind stream which is going to die at that moment, when an object is presented by the karma, the mind automatically gets attached to this, gets lean towards this. Lean towards it. That's because of the latent craving. Sometimes the attachment can happen in the mind, but sometimes the mind is lean towards that object. So therefore, we call it nimitta nikanti, but sometimes it may not be found. So so because of these two forces, the mind stream keeps on continuing. So it attached to it gets lean toward the sign which is presented by the karma. So the karma gives the result. When karma gives the result, in the next rebirth, this sign will be the object of the patisandhichitta. Why this patisandhichitta takes this object? Because at the moment of death, the mind stream leans or inclines toward this sign which was presented by the karma. And why the mind stream doesn't stop? Because of the force to keep on living. So this shows that the craving has a great influence to the mind stream of the beings. And the next thing is, so therefore it's mentioned in the bold letters, hence tanha is considered as the origin of suffering, dukkha samudaya, by the Buddha. I'll be discussing this point in detail in next semester. Then the next thing is the possession of corporeal faculties. When I say for corporeal faculties, I'm talking about the sense faculty, also the sexuality rupa, the sex faculty, like we call the bhava rupas. So these two rupas I'm talking, and there are two types of rupas. And also the Nāma rupa in a particular life is also heavily determined by the nature of the latent craving in the immediately preceding life, not the preceding life, previous life. So what is the point that I want to emphasize here is that when someone is getting after the death, so I'll erase the sign. So in the one life, someone's death and the patisandhi happens, or the mind stream happens. So in this process, the latent craving of this previous life, we call it tanha, has a great influence to the nature of Nāma rupa of the next life. So why do we say that? Think about a person who attained the jhana. A person who attained the jhana gives up the pancha kama gunika raga, the attachment to sensual pleasures. So what happens? When the attachment to the sensual pleasures is completely subdued, is suppressed, the next rebirth which is going to happen because of jhana will not support the sensual pleasures. So Brahma, it is mentioned in the literature, Brahma do get a body like a human, but he will not have the sensitivities of the nose, body and the tongue. Nose, body and the tongue. The reason is these three sensitivities are exclusively for the enjoyment of the sensual pleasures. Eye and ear can be used for the sensual pleasures and also for beneficial spiritual acts. So therefore, when the craving for the sensual desire has been suppressed by the jhanas, the next life, the person will not get the sensitivities of ear, tongue, body and nose. Same time, when someone suppresses the sensual desires, at that time the sexual desire is also fully suppressed. Otherwise one cannot have attained jhana. Therefore the Brahma lives, they will not possess the masculinity or femininity. It is mentioned in the literature, they appear as the males, but they will not have the masculine or feminine sexual faculties in their life. Because thing is, this bhava rupa is something is supported by the previous karma, which is backed up by the sensual desire. So when the sensual desire has been suppressed, in the next life, the particular faculties will not be attained. One reason. Another point I want to emphasize. There is a jhana called arupa jhana. Arupa jhana means to attain the immaterial jhana, one has to abandon the desires for all the corporeality. He has to see the defects of rupa, why rupa is dangerous, and then he proceeds from the rupa jhana to arupa jhana. Arupa jhana means higher level of jhana. In the jhana there are two levels, rupa vachana and arupa vachana. So to attain rupa vachana, you have to give up the sensual desires. To attain the arupa vachana, person has to give up the desire towards the rupa. The desire towards one's own rupa is not always sensual. Sensual desire is for the enjoyment. All the beings naturally have a certain desire for his own corporeality. This is not always sensual. So this attachment to the rupa has to be subdued in order to attain this arupa jhana. If someone attains this arupa jhana having subdued the attachment to the rupa, in the next life he will get a life without rupa. Then there is another thing called chitta viraga bhavana. When someone attains this arupa jhana, fifth jhana he attains, then there is some beings see the defects of the mind. Then they think a life without mind would be so pleasurable because all the problems are caused by the mind. So they develop a meditation called chitta viraga bhavana and they subdue the attachment to the mind. So they already had the fifth jhana. Normally the fifth jhana will give a life because when we attain the fifth jhana, already the sensual desires have been subdued. So therefore the life produced by the fifth jhana will be a Brahma life which is not supportive to the sensual desire. So the three sensitivities and the sexual faculty will not be there. But if someone gives up the attachment to the mind also, will develop the chitta viraga bhavana to a higher level, since that attachment to the mind is subdued, he will get a life without the chitta. So therefore it shows the suppression of the craving greatly affects the Nāma rupa, nature of the Nāma rupa of the next life. Sometimes the beings who have not subdued the kama sensual desire, not subdued the desire for the rupa with the attainment of jhana, arupa jhana. If someone has not subdued the desire for the chitta with the attainment of the fifth jhana, so the normal beings who have not subdued these three cravings will get a life in the kama realm with full of faculties. It means he will get all the faculties which are useful for the enjoyment of sensual desire. All the faculties and also the sex faculty. So he will be able to enjoy all the sensual desires. Then a question may come. Someone may ask, because in the sensual karma realm, some beings doesn't have the eye, some being doesn't have the ear, some being doesn't have the ear means the no sensitivity, and also they doesn't have the sex no sex in the life, sexual quality in the life. They are neither males nor females. So what does this happen? This happens not because of the effect of the craving of the previous life. This is because of the very weak karma which gives the rebirth. Normally a being born in the sensual plane should possess all the faculties which are supportive for sensual desire. That is why it's called a sensual plane. That's why we call it kama bhumi. So this, when the defilements are not subdued, if in kama bhumi, if the karma is very weaker or it is obstructed by a different akusala karma, sometimes beings may lack certain physical qualities, physical corporeal faculties. So and the next point is, if someone attains anagamihood, by completely eradicating the sensual desires. From that life onwards, he will not get the nose sensitivity, tongue sensitivity, body sensitivity and sexual faculty in the Brahma realm. There is no possibility he will attain such faculties again. If someone has completely eradicated the craving, he will not get any Nama Rupa at all after his death. So what does this say? This craving has a great influence to the Nama Rupa process. So this shows, I'm coming to another phenomenon which governs the mind and mental stream, mental and physical stream, which is the influence of the lobha. This is not, lobha is a craving. And I also want to emphasize, this wish or craving, wanting is not always unwholesome. There is a sutta called Sankharupati Sutta, given by the Buddha. The Sankharupati Sutta, Buddha mentions, when you have done a certain deed, and if you make a wish, the deed may give results, the karma may give results according to your wish. So what does this say? In our literature we know there are two types of wishes. Wish done by craving, wish done by kusala chanda. Kusala chanda means wholesome desire, that we discussed in the beginning of this lecture. So when such thoughts, someone do a good deed and wish for sensual pleasures in the next life, he may get it, Buddha mentions. Someone do a good deed and he may wish for attainment of arahanthood or wish to be good with good friends, with a purified, completely a wholesome desire, not with attachment, he may attain his wish goals accordingly. So therefore, not only craving, this wholesome wish also affects the karma. So there are two things that I discussed now. The latent craving, whether it's suppressed or not, how much it's suppressed and how much it's not suppressed, this affects the nature of the Nama Rupa in the next life. And also, not only the latent craving, according to Sankharupati Sutta, the wish we make deliberately in the mind also affects the karma to give the results accordingly. So the latent craving also affects the karma. Based on that effect, karma gives results accordingly. At the same time, when we make a wish, that also can affect the karma. But it doesn't mean that everything can be attained through wish. No, it's a wrong idea. It has to have the karma, the potential karma should be there. But this karma will be affected by the craving. So that phenomenon, I want to say that the phenomenon of wish or craving, which I have mentioned in the notes. So with this, I am concluding this lecture. So if I go to the notes in the next page of the lobha, the above description implicitly suggests another related, suggests of a phenomenon, it's mistaken, of a phenomenon related to craving that governs the sphere of mind and matter of beings. Suggests a phenomenon related to craving that governs the sphere of mind and matter of being. It means continuation of Nama Rupa happens based on the desire to live, and moreover their nature in the immediately following life is determined based on the state of the latent craving present in the particular being. For instance, when a person has not subdued the craving for corporeality and has not attained the arupa jhana, he is bound to get a life with rupa after death. The negative way I mentioned. Moreover, it is mentioned in the commentary literature that Chakupasada is produced by a karma that is under the influence of latent unsubdued craving for seeing visible forms. When it comes to the noble truths, craving is also said to be the origin of suffering. It means rebirth happens due to the wanting to live. Therefore, it is possible to mention that the mind and matter of animate beings appear according to the nature of their uneradicated craving. Karma gets affected by this latent craving and yield results under its influence. According to the Sankharupati Sutta, Buddha mentions that the way karma produced with their results can be greatly influenced by one's wish. Then, as evident from many stories in the literature, a wish can be done with both unwholesome craving and wholesome will, kusala chanda. kusala chanda patana. As stated above, tanha patana and kusala chanda patana. As stated above, a person who has subdued sensual desires and attained the jhana can be born in the kama realm with a strong desire. It means also it is mentioned that if you have even a person who has jhana, if he wishes, he may be born in the sensual realm. It means not only the latent craving, this is the point, but wholesome and unwholesome wishes made intentionally can also affect the way karmas give results. But it doesn't say everything can be attained through wish. It has to be, karma is a must. Therefore, with this information, the natural law that can be arrived at is the phenomenon of desire or wish. It is the law which greatly affects the consciousness, and it is a law which greatly affects the consciousness and corporeality of being. So this is the points I want to mention. So then next part are the synonyms of lobha, and also lobha is said to be one of the main reasons for the continuation of samsara, and it is also a root in the mental of the mentality. So we discussed about the chetasikas, their basic characteristics, about the chanda, and about the moha, and about the lobha and craving. With the craving, we came into a phenomenon called how the phenomenon of lobha affects the beings. These are the points that I want to discuss. Yes. Page 4, 5.7. Yes.
There are the group of segmented states can be found in 3 states.
Yes.
So how about the group of 10 kilesa also we can found in 3 states?
Yes. So you are correct, really. According to the, you can find in the Maha-Malukya Sutta, according to the Maha-Malukya Sutta, the first 5 Sanyojana Buddha has mentioned has been found in the Anusaya level. We can say all the 10 kilesas in the level of uneradicated level. But this information I gave, they are uneradicated, that is true. But I gave this information based on the commentarial and sub-commentarial literature, based on the Anusaya Yamaka, of the Anusaya Yamaka. They say why it is only 7 is mentioned as Anusaya, why not 10? The reason they give is, the commentators give, because they are the ones which are more powerful among the akusala dhammas. Tamagata. So that's why only 7 Anusaya is mentioned. Otherwise, as you said, we can say the question is asked by the commentators themselves. There are 10 kilesas, 14 akusalas. They are uneradicatedly exist. So why can't we call them Anusaya? The term Anusaya fits, according to their idea, Anusaya term fits only to the kilesas or the akusalas which are powerful, and they are only 6 in number. Others are uneradicated, but according to this explanation, they cannot be called Anusaya. Okay, so then we'll meet on next Sunday. We'll be continuing with the same topic further.